I've got one really good memory that I think that has stayed with me forever. And I think this was when he was missing and he was still out at sea. And she took us down to the beach and we had to write messages it was just the three of us. We had to write messages in the sand to my dad. And we each had a rose.
Yeah.
And we had to write.
It's like we had our own wee memorial service, just us. With our dad, just knowing that he's out there somewhere.
And we watched the waves take
our
messages to him.
That was really nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Reports are coming in of an explosion on board an oil rig platform in the North Sea.
Fleets of ambulances and extra doctors and nurses have been standing by all night.
Today, questions have been asked about the risks that are being run to produce Britain's oil.
The oil companies had been able to get away with too much for too long.
What was happening around you on the platform?
The platform was just disintegrating. It was pretty horrific.
I looked around the corner slightly and it's just a sheet of flames.
And I went, what rig is Dad on, Mum? And she went, oh, Piper Alpha.
That's when it hit me. I just screamed.
Down to the 68-foot level. There was nowhere else to go. All of the routes had been blocked off. I was part of the group that went down the knotted rope.
There was a route leading from the 68-foot level down towards the sea. But when I got onto the rope, it dropped. Only about 10 feet, but of course to drop any distance on a rope is quite an unpleasant experience.
As I was being taken over to the silver pit, there was another major explosion. I don't know where it originated from. It was just that big.
While you were on the silver pit, do you recall a further large explosion taking place on the platform?
Yes, there was a massive explosion a few minutes after. I remember feeling the radiated heat.
Alongside, we're 15 meters from the side, firefighting and rendering assistance.
They've no idea how many people are involved around these.
Do you know roughly how many people?
No idea.
I just thought I was burning alive. I just took a run and jumped off the helipad. And I remember opening my eyes when I was under the water and looking up. I can't say for sure, but I thought that the water might be on fire. And initially, my life jacket was all twisted, and so I was starting to drown. My boots were actually pulling me under the water, so I had to kick them off as well.
What was happening around you on the platform itself?
I couldn't really distinguish between one bang and another. There was a tremendous amount of noise. I noticed at one point the part of the crane on the east side fell into the water.
The only way off was to get to the side, to get to the water. We headed towards the east, just to see what would be there. I looked around the corner slightly, and that was enough. It was just a sheet of flames.
Drilling equipment, blocks of steel, the drill bits, they were being thrown about like matchsticks. You were more or less just huddled there waiting to be hit and hoping it wasn't going to be too bad.
We went into the fabrication shop. We heard a crashing and a banging, which at the time I thought maybe above us. Things starting to fall. There was a steel table welded to the workshop flare, so we decided to go underneath there. The smoke was very bad. We were against the floor, just talking to each other, trying to keep each other conscious.
That was when I felt the platform start to go. Just slightly. It started to tilt about maybe 2 or 3 degrees. Then there was another massive explosion. And we were all out the drill store. The pipe deck had gone to 45 degrees by that time.
Then we heard the parting of steel. Grating noises. And it started to tip over. We thought that was it.
I saw someone from about here to Lord Cullen away from me.
Did you go to his assistance?
Yes. And he was spitting out water, and I think he was drowning. And I could see various boats in the distance, but they were miles away. Eventually, one of these fast rescue crafts came and picked 2 or 3 bodies out of the water and then went away again, and we were just floating and floating for ages. It seemed like an eternity. But after a while, that boat, I think, came back and cut its engines, and we both agreed that this was a last attempt to get picked up. So we simultaneously splashed and screamed and shouted to catch its attention. And luckily enough, we were successful, and they came by and picked us up.
Did you go back onto the pipe deck?
Yes. It was like you're at the centre. Everything around you was in flames.
I remember we were crouched down on this deck, which was at about 45-degree angle. And I remember, I think it was Ian Fowler, the joiner, and he was standing on what looked like the jib of a crane. And he was beckoning us across the pipe deck up onto that debris, because he could obviously see a way over to the water.
I could see downwards. The sea was on fire slightly. There were flames in the water. I jumped.
Did you jump into the water?
Yes. Well, they reckoned it was 150 feet.
There were further explosions and more debris was falling, and it was quite terrifying because there was nothing around about us. The whole thing was just disintegrating, and we decided we should swim away from the platform.
The RAF and the Coast Guard were saying that the platform was ablaze from sea level to the top of the platform. The only programme that was on air at that time, only news programme that was on air that time was Newsnight.
Good evening.
My producer and I phoned the producer of Newsnight to say this is a huge story.
Since we've come on the air, reports have started to come through of a major rescue operation in the North Sea. It seems there has been a fire and an explosion on an oil rig with 200 men on board, and a major rescue operation is now underway. But I hope that on the line now is our reporter Jane Frankie from Aberdeen. Jane, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Donald, I can. Details are still very sketchy, but according to the Coast Guard, the explosion happened about an hour and a half ago on the Piper Alpha platform. They say that there are men in the water and others still on board. According to the RAF, an emergency evacuation of the platform has been requested by the operators with a view to abandoning the platform altogether.
We knew it was huge. I don't think any of us could have guessed how huge.
Can you say how long you had been in the water before you were rescued?
I'm afraid I don't know. I didn't realise whether I was doing things fast or slow. Time was irrelevant. Someone threw a lifeline to me and tied it around my waist, but I was just getting battered up beside the boat. I don't know if it was the emotion of getting rescued, but I lost all power.
I saw a supply boat. It's impossible for them to see. It just missed me. I'm certain they were looking for survivors, but they never saw me. It was starting to get very choppy there.
I think you were eventually picked up by a Zodiac crew.
Yes.
But I spotted a piece of debris about half a mile out, and I managed to get on top of it. So the top half of my body was out of the water. It was bitterly cold.
can actually see that the rig is on fire. Stand by for further.
I started filming when I could see the platform, or what was the remains of the platform. So we'd be probably about 2 or 3 miles away.
Hello, Rescue 138 is on scene.
138, this is Amber Rescue, Roger, on scene, out.
Back in 1988, I was making a television series about the RAF Search and Rescue Squadron. I was based at RAF Lossiemouth in North Scotland.
Bloody hell, it's very on fire, isn't it? Yeah, they've got sweating already.
The fire was so intense that my film couldn't expose the correct temperature of the fire. Everything was going white. It was so intense, and the heat was tremendous. We could feel the side of the fuselage getting hotter and hotter as we got nearer and nearer to the platform.
Can you see them on radar? Because I've difficulty seeing things in all this flaring light at the front.
Okay, we're back on the radar.
You can stay on radar, pal.
Yeah, okay.
It's bloody bright, isn't it?
When I could see parts of the platform collapsing into the sea.
Right, there she goes. It's certainly collapsing.
I saw one section of it, was quite a big chunk, sliding into the water, and I believe now that that was the accommodation platform. It was apocalyptic. It was unbelievable.
Rescue 138, I have made contact with the vessel Silver Pit, who now has 30-some casualties, including some injured. Check the feasibility of commencing the winch recovery of those people. Yep. He is moving closer to Tharos. He is a converted fishing vessel with a small landing area.
It surprises me when I think back just how well the survivors performed. The dive team assisted in looking after people who had survived the disaster on the Silver Pit. My job was to coordinate, and the divers did a great deal of legwork.
Right one. Steady, they have it.
There was difficulty experienced in putting these people into stretchers.
Because the high line is still attached. If you'd like to move left and back. Okay.
I can tell you, it was extremely difficult to maneuver these people, given the nature of their injuries. It was quite horrific.
Now, stop waiting for our Somebody has all on board. They're back behind, up and away.
Yeah, you'll be fine now. Thank you. And symptomatic.
Arriving on Tharos, it was like a field hospital in wartime, basically.
Stuff in here, medic stuff or paramedic stuff in the cinema.
More and more were arriving every few minutes. They'd be bringing them in on stretchers or helping people that couldn't walk in. Some guys were just carrying other men with them.
On the 6th of July, I was in bed. I was in bed asleep, as I think we all were. My aunties were driving home from an evening out, and it came up on the news, on the radio, that there'd been an explosion.
Reports are coming in of an explosion on board an oil rig platform in the North Sea. The explosion happened on the Piper Alpha platform, which is owned by the Occidental Company and operates 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen.
My auntie clearly knew that that was Dad's rig. She'd contacted one of my dad's brothers, and Uncle Mike had said, well, there's no point waking Mum up for us to just sit and watch, what's going on. So that was the decision that they made, which clearly we're very grateful for, because we would have just sat all night watching and not knowing where Dad was.
Were you later taken from the Silver Pit by helicopter to the Tharos?
Yes. I was given some medical attention there. I had a few stitches put into the cut on my hand. They thought something had gone into my hip, but the bone, fortunately, the bone had stopped anything, and the bone was not broken or anything.
How bad is this incident, in your opinion? Tragic. I'm not sure the number of casualties. I believe it's about 150 casualties, but I'm not sure yet. I haven't got the full numbers.
I'd burnt both my hands, my elbow, my backside. Both my feet were badly bruised, and every bone in my body felt like it was bruised, I still got a pain in my side, in my ribcage, just here. But I think that was partly due to jumping into the sea, going into the water,
Rescue 138 at Tharos, you are carrying one fatality, is that correct?
We're now carrying 2.
Understood, sir. And you have a task after that?
I was dispatched to the helipad at Aberdeen Royal Infirmary, which is on a grass verge, really, in front of the main hospital at that time. And I was sent there basically to wait for helicopters. We assumed there'd be fleets of them coming in.
We all expected mass casualties. That's what we thought. And so the hospital site prepared itself for the arrival of hundreds. I remember us all just waiting and waiting and waiting.
At 3:20, nearly 6 hours after the explosion, the first survivors arrived back in Aberdeen, airlifted from the seas around the platform straight to the helipad at the Royal Infirmary. Fleets of ambulances and extra doctors and nurses have been standing by all night.
I almost didn't hear the helicopters anymore because I'm so focused on what I was doing.
I remember this figure. Grey, absolutely grey, eyes in shock, but he was walking, and it was Bob Ballantyne.
Later, were you taken to the Royal Infirmary at Aberdeen?
That's correct.
Did you sustain some injury?
I had burns to my face and the tinnitus.
So I woke up on the morning of the 7th to the doorbell ringing. I got up to answer the intercom, and it was the police on the other end. And I let them in, and they said that there had been an incident offshore, and that Bob was okay, so not to worry, he was fine. And that I could probably go and get him from the hospital. I was in such a daze, I really had no idea what they were actually telling me. So we arrived at the hospital. Felt like that was kind of chaotic. There were people everywhere, had no idea how to find Bob, nobody could tell us anything. And eventually, we actually found the little room that Bob was in. And he started to try and not explain, because it was only bits that were coming out, but that's when it hit me that something rather enormous had happened. And he was trying to tell me that I do remember him saying that they're all dead. It transpired that it was like the people that he knew best on the rig that he had left with.
It's 7 o'clock on Thursday, the 7th of July, and this is the BBC's Breakfast Time programme. A very good morning to you. Today's main story. 192 people are still missing after the explosion late last night on an oil platform in the North Sea. 232 people were working on the Piper Alpha platform when the explosion happened. The cause isn't yet known.
And I went, Piper Alpha, that name doesn't sound familiar.
Our reporter in Aberdeen, Jane Frankie, has been to the hospital, and possibly we can link up with Jane now. Jane, good morning, are you there?
Good morning, yes I am.
A distressing scene at the hospital. What is the latest from there?
Well, it really hasn't changed much. The situation hasn't changed much. There have been 7 helicopters in now who've brought in 27 men. 16 of them have been detained and 1 is serious.
So phoned home. My mum came to the phone. I went, what rig is Dad on, Mum? And she went, oh, Piper Alpha. And I went, turn on the telly. And she went, what's up? I went, Mum, it's blew up. And Piper Alpha's like on fire.
Do you have any indication yet of the extent or seriousness of the injuries at the hospital?
They all looked like burns. Those on the stretchers looked very seriously injured. They were completely covered from head to toe. Some of them were on drips as they were carried out of the helicopters.
And then the phone just got hung up. And my uncle was standing at my side and he's going. And I went, Piper Alpha's blew up. My dad's on it. And he went, well, there's nothing we can do about it just now. We'll need to get to our work. He was clearly in shock as well. I can see that with hindsight. I went, but we don't know if he's alive or dead.
Obviously, the picture very confused still. We'll come back to you as soon as we have any more information. For the time being, thank you very much indeed. Let me tell you that people concerned about relatives on board the Piper Alpha production platform in the North Sea should ring this telephone number. It's 0224 64.
There was a knock at the door which woke me up, and it woke Mum up too as well. And Mum walked past my room to the hall to answer the door to Uncle Mike, and I heard a conversation, kind of muffled conversation, and then I just remember my mum making a noise which I won't forget. Kind of a massive intake of breath. And I thought, oh gosh, that's unusual, what's going on? And I just walked down the corridor and I said, what's wrong? What's going on? And Uncle Mike just looked at me and said, your dad's oil rig's on fire, Rachel. And he's been missing all night.
One of the rescue helicopters took me to Aberdeen Hospital. While I was in there, one of the chaps came in who lived in Aberdeen, there, Bill, and he asked me if I could do anything for me. And I says, I'd like you to phone my wife and tell her I'm okay. Off he went, and then he came back with a chap with the suit on and the clipboard and pointed out that he'd stopped Bill phoning my wife as he Occidental and we're in charge of things and we don't want misinformation going out. So Bill says, what do you want me to do, Jeff? And I said, I'd like you to go and phone my wife. And he said to the fella, he heard what he said, so you can bleep, bleep. And off he went. And that was the first time my wife had heard that I was okay, I'd survived.
It's possibly one of the biggest ever explosions in the North Sea. It is almost certainly one of the biggest rescue operations. 21 ships are out there, 11 helicopters.
Many hours into the incident and after the sun had come up and we'd organised the evacuation of the seriously injured, we were transferred to the Tharos. We had to go to a supply boat first, and then from the supply boat we were lifted by a crane in what's known as a basket transfer onto the Tharos, and then after an hour or so we were evacuated by helicopter.
Rescue 138, lifting, departing for Aberdeen.
Rescue 138, Tharos, copy you, lifting for Aberdeen. Thank you for your help and assistance, sir.
When we got onto the helicopter, you felt safe for the first time that night. I remember when we approached the land that it just looked beautiful. It looked green. You could smell the land actually, and it was a remarkable sensation. So for me at least, there was this heightened sense of perception, which presumably is just to do with survival and how you might react to it.
It was obviously very early in the morning. We were all still in bed. I heard the phone because when my dad was offshore, I was the ears of the house then, you know, because my mum was deaf. I got up and answered the phone, and there was a lady there saying, "Can you wake your mummy up? Can you wake your mummy up?"
So I thought, right, I got up, and it was a family member, and she says, "Fiona," she says, "there's been an explosion on the rigs in the North Sea." And I thought, there's hundreds of rigs out there. It's okay. I went downstairs and I put the telly on, and that's when I seen explosion, and I seen between 80 odds and 100 men missing. That's when it hit me. And it was like somebody, I just screamed. Two policemen came to the door to tell me that Frank's probably missing. And after that, we would just watch the telly, we waited to see all the survivors coming off, and we were wanting to see if he was one of them. And the more time went on, you just knew he wasn't coming home. You just knew it.
What I was aware of as the night drew on into the hours of the morning was that no more patients came into resus, that the helicopter noise had stopped. We looked at one another. Oh, what could you do?
I can remember the moment when we were told there were going to be no more helicopters coming in. And it was families being told that if they hadn't seen their loved ones by then, they weren't going to.
The knowledge that their fathers, husbands and sons were in a dangerous profession makes no difference now. There have been tears and terrible distress here today, and the industry on which this city depends is in mourning.
So that photograph there is actually the Friday night before. So that's what, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. It's 5 days before he died. And it was a kind of farewell party or a good luck party for me going down to the army. So I was 18 and a half and he was, what, 41 then? And my dad and my mum took me up to Edinburgh Waverley. And yeah, my dad shook my hand. I remember him shaking my hand and saying, "Go to it." In 1988, my father, David Gorman, was subcontracted to Piper Alpha. So basic training, you didn't get any access to newspapers, you didn't watch TV, you're in the army. It was my lieutenant, my commanding officer came in and said, you have to go home now. So they gave me a train warrant and took me to Darlington train station in a Land Rover and just dropped me off. Of course, I'm still none the wiser to what's going on, and I'm really confused about why I'm being sent home, and really confused about what I don't really understand what's happening. So I went into the newsagent to buy a can of Coke and a Mars bar or something, and the papers were just covered. Metal sticking out of the sea, headlines reporting of the amount of people that had died. And honestly, I just knew, right then, that he was dead and he wasn't coming back. I just knew it straight away. And I just wept the whole way up on the train. And I'm 18 years old. And I was comforted by two old ladies who I've never seen since and don't know where they went, you know, who they were. I don't even think I managed to tell them why I was so upset, but maybe I did. I don't remember. It was kind of blank from there on in.
A fleet of warships and oil supply boats and helicopters are still combing the sea 120 miles northeast of Aberdeen, but hopes of finding survivors are fading.
Mrs. Thatcher visited Aberdeen Royal Infirmary and spent over an hour talking to staff and the 22 patients being treated, many of whom suffered burns.
How do you feel yourself now you've seen the people in hospital? What does it make you feel?
I think that they have quite a lot of information to give, which will be of help to see that similar accidents don't happen again.
The first recollection I have of seeing my dad was when he was like part of the media circus.
Andy.
I mean, he's got the bags on his hands. And I hadn't had the opportunity to speak to him at this point. So I was seeing my dad along with everybody else in the world, if you like, on the telly, which was bizarre.
Did you hesitate before you jumped? Did you just go for it?
No, the decision was made for me. It was roasting. You know, it was fry or jump, so it was jump.
We've been told that it was just a humongous sense of relief, just knowing he was alive.
So most people on the rig wouldn't have had any chance at all of getting off?
None whatsoever, no.
You must be one of the lucky ones, then.
You wonder why me?
And what thoughts were going through your mind, like when you were in the war?
Well, you obviously pray, you know, but you think about your family, your wife and kids, simple as that.
What was the worst thing about the night? What was the worst thing you experienced?
I would say the worst thing that you experienced was thinking you were going to die 100 times, you know.
Andy? How old are you, Andy? Andy, can you look up?
48.
Andy, Andy, can you look up here? Andy, what did you do on the rig? What was your job?
In the hospital wards this evening, some of those who were more seriously burned. These men found themselves jumping into a sea of oil, which had been ignited within minutes of the explosions. Their injuries will take many months, if not years, to heal.
And how are the patients bearing up emotionally and psychologically to what's happened to them?
Well, they've improved dramatically in the last 24 hours. And you've been in the ward and you've seen that they're talking to each other, socialising, helping each other. Their morale is tremendous, really. The least severely injured people are suffering the greatest psychological traumas. Perhaps they had more to think about and perhaps a little less to experience, but all of them were suffering psychologically to a tremendous degree.
Mark Reed's one of the few to escape the choking smoke and confusion of Piper Alpha.
It was only when my wife brought my wee baby boy up to me yesterday that emotionally, for the first time, I realised what had happened, and I was one of the lucky ones, you know. She just walked through the door with him, you know, and excuse me, I can't hold back the tears, but and she just put him there, and then I realised that I was one of the lucky ones, because I know there'll probably be a few wives watching just now that aren't so lucky.
It wasn't until I seen photographs like this one that even although it's in black and white, it's more apparent just how severe those injuries were in the beginning and how heavily bandaged up he had to be. I mean, it's just surreal mentions for me as the baby at the time, now seeing things like Mark looks forward to reunion with his wife and son, and realising that I was that son. The pain that he's feeling is not just the pain in his burns, but the pain in his mind for having to actually recollect all of this in such a short space of time, so soon after all of this happening.
He'd gone through this horrific experience. He was feeling really bad about being alive. He must have been living in absolute terror, constant terror, constantly reliving some of the blackest moments of what he'd gone through and not able to switch it off. But very, very quickly, within a couple of days or so, he's thinking, this has been happening, that there was a whole lot of factors were contributing to this explosion, and they have to be brought into the open.
These oil men need a drink to unwind, much more than usual. The talk is of friends they've lost. The tragedy, they say, touches everyone in or close to the industry.
Before Piper Alpha, for many people, the fear had been growing that something like this might happen. There was pressure to maximise production, work harder.
Most in the bar felt too many accidents were still happening.
Let's get the work done. To hell with safety, that's what happens out there, okay?
There was anger at the industry more generally, not just Oxy, because they were simply one player among several.
300 miles south of Piper Alpha, 100 men have resigned from their jobs on 3 gas platforms. They say they're worried about safety standards.
The case, particularly what happened yesterday concerning the 160 men that lost their lives, that something has to be done concerning safety.
Before its destruction, the Piper field was producing about 125,000 barrels a day, worth about £1.5 million. But that, unlike the human loss, is recoverable. Today has shown what a high price can be paid for the oil which is keeping our economy going. The men sum up morale on the North Sea quite simply.
Very low. I think a lot of people are looking whether they'll go back offshore. Obviously when they come home, their wife's going to say, well, enough's enough.
Another survivor's wife, another problem. Everyone, say the social work team who've been working round the clock, is different. Sometimes it's a practical problem, quite often a financial one, and many, many times they're listening to the weeping of a widow. But the most important thing is the listening.
The shock is beginning to wear off, and they're feeling that they need to see someone to talk through their problems, and practical problems, and also, just how they're having to respond to their feelings about what's happened.
There was this dark cloud over Aberdeen at the time. Everyone you met, they had some sort of connection, and they often saw that as that they wanted to tell you about their connection and their distress, because there was an awful lot of distress.
It's a curious thing when you go through an experience like that. You want to be away from it, but also actually psychologically, you probably need to be back there. So I was drawn back to Aberdeen. And I'd heard that the social services had opened a thing called the Piper Outreach. I didn't really know what it was, to be honest, so I just found out where they were and showed up at their address. I believe I was the first person to walk in their door. And it was run by a really wonderful woman called Anne Bone.
We are having to cope with demands for visits. People are in such distress that they wish to see somebody straight away.
Then we had the survivors they wanted to meet, so we set up survivors meetings. And then there was the widows group, and then there was the survivors' wives group. You know, when you think about the numbers of people that were involved on the night, you know, the survivors and all the families, and you think, oh, well, that's a lot of people. But what I don't think people realise that is just that's like throwing a stone into a water and the ripple effects. There's so many people were affected by Piper.
I was 29, Frank was 33. Had his whole life ahead of him. Missed a lot of things out, girls' weddings, all his grandkids. Oh, but it was horrendous. It's just that your mind plays silly tricks when you're grieving and you're in shock, eh? Maybe he's waiting for me somewhere and he'll phone me and we'll all join him. I think it was just in your mind you're hoping. You're hoping that he's okay somewhere. Cara used to tell me she had nightmares, and I'd ask her, what was your nightmares? And she says that she dreamed Daddy was coming in the door and he was covered in seaweed and seashells stuck to him.
I remember the time I ran away from school.
You ran away from school as well.
Yeah.
I actually thought I was dying myself, but I actually wrote a will. That's how bad it was. I felt Frank was pulling me up there with him.
Dad got home. I suppose I was thinking, how is he going to cope with what he's just been through? Behaviour, without him realising, I think, was different. It was physically my dad, but that he would be in a room but not be in the room. You know, Mum said that he'd go missing for days. And that went on for quite a long time. And Mum just tried to keep it all together for us all. And she did. It was down to my mum. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
You get a feeling of, first of all, anger, rejection, and then total don't give a damn about nothing type thing, you know. People have forgotten me, you know. Maybe I should just have been killed and made it nice and tidy for them. But, you know, we're a bit of flotsam after it that is quite difficult to deal with.
He absolutely had survivor's guilt, and that was apparent from the get-go. The phone was just going all the time. Fellow survivors, people who had lost family members whose bodies still hadn't been recovered. Could he remember seeing people? Could he remember where they seen them? And if there was anything that he could have done to ease the pain, suffering, mental anguish that families were going through, then he absolutely perceived that as a responsibility.
One of the thoughts that we had, which was it might be helpful if we put a sort of newsletter together. I think at the end we were nearly 1,000 people that we would send it out to. We decided that we would try and link with children.
I remember writing this. The children of all the families, we used to be able to send in our letters, and we used to get to read other children's stories in these letters. And this was this was my letter. My daddy was on Piper Alpha Somebody phoned my mum when we were sleeping. My mum was crying, so was I. And my sister. I miss him a lot. I loved him very much. That night, my nana and my mum said to me, my daddy will be home on a boat, but he wasn't.
I worked for Frank Doran, MP for Aberdeen South. Many of Frank's constituents were people who worked in the industry, and many were those who were working on Piper Alpha. So on the one hand, you were in shock because everyone was in shock. But on the other hand, there was a job to be done. But the biggest thing, I think, was to focus on what next. What do we do about this? If we were ever to answer the question, how do we stop this happening again? Absolutely critical to understand what happened on this occasion. What was it that caused the disaster? Who made those decisions, and what were the consequences of the decisions?
The Energy Secretary emerged from today's Cabinet meeting saying there would be a deep and very far-reaching public inquiry into the Piper Alpha disaster.
Nearly 30,000 people work in the United Kingdom sector of the North Sea. They and their families have the right to expect the fullest possible investigation.
What can you offer the families of the many thousands of people whose loved ones work in the North Sea oil industry? What can you offer them tonight to assuage their worries?
A determination to get to the bottom of this if we can, to learn from it what we can, and to make sure so far as we can that it doesn't happen again.
Does the responsibility for safety on those platforms ultimately rest at your door?
It rests ultimately with the operator. It is the operator who is responsible for safety.
Fairly recently, we had just been appointed as the Scots lawyers for Occidental in Aberdeen. And when we arrived, it was all very, very sombre, and people were in a state of shock. And a lot of the people at Occidental had worked with these people who had died. But the main thing, as far as Oxy was concerned, was that they wanted to find out exactly what had happened and why it had happened, and learn lessons from it.
Flags were flying at half-mast as Armand Hammer, president of Occidental Petroleum, which owns the platform, arrived at Aberdeen Airport.
Well, I think it was my duty to come here. After all, I'm the chief executive officer, and the buck stops at my desk. Well, accidents will occur, no matter what we do. But I think the record we have has been so good that we've done everything we could do to prevent accidents of this kind. We will do our best to get to the bottom of problems. I can assure you that we'll leave no stone unturned. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
People, particularly the survivors, and indeed the bereaved relatives, were trying to find out what went wrong. There were, you can imagine, there were all sorts of conspiracy theories and things like that going around, but something had clearly gone catastrophically wrong.
6 weeks after the Piper Alpha disaster, there are increasing fears that the truth about safety aboard may never be established. It's still not known what caused the explosion, which claimed 167 lives.
The public inquiry into exactly what did happen will be chaired by Judge Lord Cullen. He'll also try to find ways of preventing such a disaster ever happening again.
I think people were hopeful that this would be a way they would find out what had happened to their loved one. They were hopeful that this would mean that they would get answers to questions that were why it happened. I mean, the way the inquiry was set up was that each of the survivors were subpoenaed really to come along and give their story, their experience on the night. And so that was quite daunting because they felt very responsible to get it right.
Despite the distress the inquiry may bring to survivors and families, no one denies their evidence must be heard.
When you witness something like that, of course it's going to have a very powerful effect on you. I mean, I saw some really awful things. Fortunately for me, I was able to engage in a carefully projected fury. When it came to the public inquiry, I was very keen to say some things. I was very keen to say some things about the industry in a wider sense, not just about Piper Alpha.
It's been part of a personal obsession, and the only way in which I've been able to live my life is to turn that obsession into a stand.
As a run-up to the inquiry starting, there were some families and some individuals that felt quite strongly that the families and the survivors and those that had died would get some form of justice, that this would bring answers. Occidental would be brought to rights, basically.
Bob had been conducting his own, if you like, inquiry. He was fired up by this need to know what had happened. He really needed to know what exactly caused the disaster. And I'm not talking about who did it. I'm talking about what did the oil companies do? What had they been doing over a long period of time that could all have contributed towards this?
There's been a lot said about the safety. What do you feel about the safety?
To be quite honest, just now, sorry about it.
What do you think of the reaction of the oil companies, Occidental, and the government in the wake of the disaster?
I mean, the hypocrisy is coming across from them. It's pure hypocrisy.
Why?
Because there's an awful lot of money there. And they've got to keep producing alpha to produce their profits. And it's profits before people.
You cannot fight a fire like that. You have to turn off its fuel, and that didn't happen.
There was still a sense that this could happen again. There are still rigs out there pumping oil that are not safe.
It wasn't just Occidental who was carrying on their business in this way.
You were trying to get answers. You were trying to find out what went wrong. You wanted to find out who's to blame in all this.
Was anybody going to be brought to justice?